For the last 3 years, landlords in America have been untouchable. They raised rents by hundreds of dollars overnight, and tenants paid it because they had no choice. They ran bidding wars on apartments the same way sellers ran bidding wars on houses. They removed appliances from listings and called them minimalist. They added fees for everything: pet fees, parking fees, amenity fees, a fee for paying your rent online. They did all of this because the math worked. Demand was overwhelming. Supply was tight, and the renter had exactly zero leverage. That era is over. In the cities we're about to walk through, rents aren't just softening, they are actively falling, double digits in some markets. Vacancy rates are climbing. Luxury buildings that ran year-long wait lists are now offering 2 months free, waived deposits, and gift cards just to get someone to sign a lease. Landlords who spent 3 years acting like they owned the economy are quietly discovering what happens when you overbuild, overprice, and overestimate demand all at the same time. This is not a rumor. This is not a forecast. This is happening right now in 10 specific cities, backed by data that was released in the last 60 days. And if you are currently renting in any of these markets, what we're about to tell you could save you thousands of dollars in the next lease negotiation you didn't even know you had leverage in. If you're a landlord in these markets, we're going to be honest with you too. You might not like it, but you need to hear it. Subscribe before we start because this channel doesn't sugarcoat the housing market. Let's get into it. Entry 10. Austin, Texas. Austin was the city where landlords could do no wrong. Then they did everything wrong. 3 years ago, Austin was the hottest rental market in the country. Remote workers were pouring in. Tech companies were setting up campuses. People were paying application fees on apartments they'd never seen just to get a shot at a lease. Landlords raised rents by 20, 30, sometimes 40% in a single renewal cycle, and tenants absorbed it because every other option was just as expensive. It felt permanent. It wasn't. Average rent in Austin has dropped 14% year over year, one of the sharpest declines in the entire country. A one-bedroom that was going for $1,800 in 2022 is now being offered at $1,450 in the same building with 1 month free on top. Vacancy rates have hit levels not seen in a decade. More than 12,000 new apartment units delivered to the Austin market in 2024 alone, right as the tech layoffs that gutted demand began hitting Oracle, Meta, and Tesla's local operations simultaneously. The twist is that Austin's landlords didn't just lose tenants, they lost the specific type of tenant that made the numbers work. High-income tech workers who would pay $2,200 for a one-bedroom without negotiating because their relocation package covered it. Those renters are gone. What's left is a market full of luxury product priced for people who no longer live here, competing for renters who earn what Austin locals have always earned, which is considerably less. A property manager in South Austin posted, "I manage 40 units. A year ago, I had a wait list for everything. Right now, I have 9 vacancies, and I've dropped asking rent on every single one. My owners are furious. I keep telling them the market changed. They keep asking me to fix it. I cannot fix supply and demand." Here's what that vacancy rate means in human terms. For every unit sitting empty in Austin right now, there is a landlord making a mortgage payment, an insurance payment, and a property tax payment on a unit generating zero income. Small landlords, the ones who bought 1 or 2 properties as retirement investments, are the ones bleeding the most. The institutional investors have reserves. The mom and pop landlord does not. Austin spent 3 years telling renters they were lucky to be there. Rooftop pools, co-working lounges, kombucha on tap in the lobby. Now those same buildings are offering 2 months free and a Visa gift card. The kombucha is still there. Nobody's drinking it. A leasing agent at a glass tower off South Congress is updating the buildingsapartments.com listing for the 3rd time this month. She's adding 6 weeks free to a unit that has been vacant for 11 weeks. Her phone buzzes. It's the building owner asking for an update. She types back, "Working on it," and stares at the empty pool deck outside the window. Drop finally, or "too late for me" in the comments. If Austin's drop surprised you, the next city is going to be worse. Entry 9. Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix overbuilt so aggressively that the market didn't just soften, it buried itself. Phoenix was the Sunbelt success story of the pandemic era. People fled California in droves and landed in Phoenix because it was warm, affordable relative to the coasts, and growing fast enough that it felt like betting on a sure thing. Developers responded the way developers always respond to that story, well, by building as fast as physically possible and then building some more. More than 30,000 new apartments were delivered to the Phoenix metro in 2024. Average rent has fallen roughly 12% year over year. In some submarkets, Chandler, Tempe, parts of Scottsdale, the drops are closer to 15%. Vacancy rates across Class A properties are running above 10% in several zip codes. Landlords are offering incentives that have not been seen in this market since the financial crisis. Free months, waived fees, furnished units, prepaid utilities for the first 6 months. Phoenix built luxury product for a California income renter. The problem is that California income renters stopped coming at the rate developers planned for. The ones who stayed are earning Arizona incomes, and Arizona incomes have not caught up to Arizona rents, let alone the luxury tier. The market built a product with no natural buyer at the price point it needed to sustain. That math resolves in exactly one direction. A Phoenix investor who owns a 24-unit building posted, "I'm at 71% occupancy right now. My break even is 85%. I've been subsidizing this building out of my own pocket for 4 months. I did not buy a rental property to pay rent on it myself, but here we are." That investor's math is playing out across thousands of Phoenix properties simultaneously. And unlike the 2008 crisis, these are not fraudulent loans or synthetic financial products. These are real buildings owned by real people who made real bets on a growth story that overshot. The correction isn't dramatic. It's a slow, grinding, monthly cash flow problem that eventually forces a decision. Phoenix's motto might as well be, "We'll figure out the demand part later." They figured out the supply part exceptionally well. 30,000 units in a single year. That is not a housing market. That is an industrial operation that forgot to check whether anyone needed the output. A Phoenix landlord walks through his newly completed 18-unit complex in Chandler. It's beautiful. Quartz countertops, smart locks, a small gym that smells like new rubber. 7 of the 18 units are occupied. He stands in the empty courtyard on a Tuesday afternoon, calculating how long he can carry the empty units before he has to make a call he doesn't want to make. Phoenix renter win or landlord L? Let the comments sort it out. Next up, a city where the crash is quieter, but the pain is deeper. Audi. And out Atlanta, Georgia. Atlanta was marketed as the city that had it all figured out. Then it built 50,000 apartments it couldn't fill. Atlanta's pitch was perfect. Southern charm, growing job market, reasonable cost of living relative to the Northeast and West Coast, a thriving black professional class, and enough tech and film industry presence to feel cosmopolitan without the coastal price tag. Developers heard that pitch and responded with the most aggressive construction cycle in the city's history. Between 2021 and 2024, more than 50,000 new rental units came online in the Atlanta metro. Rents have fallen roughly 9% year over year. In Midtown and Buckhead, the premium submarkets and vacancy rates are running above 12%. Student loan repayment resumption hit Atlanta's renter base particularly hard, as the city has a large concentration of younger professional renters who were already stretching their budgets. Landlords across the metro are now dangling free months, 0 deposits, and parking included, perks that were completely unthinkable in 2022. Atlanta's oversupply problem has a geographic dimension that makes it worse than the headline numbers suggest. The new inventory is concentrated in the premium urban core. Midtown, West Midtown, Old Fourth Ward. But the renters who were priced out of those areas during the boom moved to the suburbs and locked into leases. The new supply landed in the wrong zip codes to reach the renters who might actually want it at a price they can afford. A Midtown Atlanta property manager said, "We have 34 units available right now. Before 2023, we had maybe 3 or 4 at any given time. I have people coming in for tours and leaving without applying because they know they can negotiate. They're right. We're negotiating. We're doing things I never thought this building would do." For landlords who borrowed heavily to fund construction during the peak, the occupancy gap is a cash flow crisis with a ticking clock. Miss enough payments on a construction loan and the bank starts asking questions. Some Atlanta developers who were celebrated in 2022 for bold projects are now in quiet conversations with lenders about workout arrangements that will never make the news. Atlanta spent 3 years building luxury apartments for the city it thought it was becoming. It turns out 50,000 units of upscale urban living hits different when inflation has eaten through the discretionary income of the exact demographic you were building for. The rooftop views are still there. The lease-up timeline is not. A leasing consultant in a brand new Midtown tower is showing a unit to a couple who drove from Decatur. She has given this tour 12 times this week. 9 of those tours ended without an application. This couple asks about concessions. She doesn't even pause before saying yes. ATL renter finally wins or should have built less. Drop it below. The next city on this list proves that even the most resilient markets eventually break. Entry 7. Nashville, Tennessee. Nashville convinced itself the party would never end. The math had other plans. Nashville's rise was genuinely impressive. A real economy built on healthcare, music, tourism, and a steady stream of corporate relocations. Amazon chose Nashville for a major operations hub. Oracle announced a campus. The bachelorette party industrial complex alone was generating enough economic activity to sustain a small city. Rents climbed, and the story supporting them felt legitimate. Nashville rents have fallen roughly 10% year over year with some submarkets, particularly the overdeveloped corridor along the Cumberland River and parts of East Nashville, seeing drops closer to 13 to 14%. Inventory has surged. More than 8,000 new units delivered in the last 18 months into a market that was already tightening at the edges. Corporate hiring that drove the relocation wave has slowed sharply. Short-term rental operators who converted units to Airbnb during the tourism peak are now flooding units back into the long-term rental market as tourism normalizes and the city tightens STR regulations. The short-term rental reversal is the story nobody is telling loudly enough. Nashville had thousands of units pulled out of the long-term rental supply during the boom years, turned into Airbnbs, catering to the bachelorette and tourism economy. Now those units are coming back. The long-term rental market is absorbing supply from two directions simultaneously: new construction deliveries and STR conversions. That is a double supply shock hitting a market where demand is already cooling. A Nashville short-term rental host posted, "I converted 2 units to long-term because the Airbnb income dropped 35% from peak. The problem is everyone else had the same idea at the same time. Now I'm a landlord in a flooded long-term market. I traded one problem for a different problem. The tragedy here is entirely self-inflicted at the market level. Landlords, developers, and STR operators all individually made rational decisions that collectively produced an irrational outcome. Too much supply, too fast, into a market that was already running hot. Nobody coordinated, nobody pulled back, and now everyone is paying for the sum of all those individual rational choices. Nashville is the city where you can get a 2-bedroom apartment with a honky-tonk view, 2 months free, and a parking spot, which is impressive because 3 years ago you couldn't get a parking spot in Nashville for any amount of money. Progress of a kind. A Nashville landlord who converted 2 units from Airbnb back to long-term rentals is scrolling Zillow at midnight. Both units are listed. One has had 2 inquiries in 3 weeks. The other has had none. He checks his Airbnb dashboard out of habit, then closes the app. The numbers are worse there too. Music City Renter W or Bro Landlord L. The comments are open, halfway through the list, and it only gets sharper from here. Entry 6. Las Vegas, Nevada. Las Vegas built its rental market on the assumption that the house always wins. For landlords in 2026, the house is losing. Las Vegas runs on tourism, hospitality, and the service economy that supports both. When people have money and confidence, they come to Vegas and spend. The housing market that grew around that economy felt bulletproof. Constant population inflow from California, a growing permanent resident base, and an entertainment economy that seemed recession-resistant. Landlords priced accordingly. Rents across Las Vegas have fallen close to 10% since 2023. Vacancy rates have nearly doubled in large apartment communities across Henderson and Summerlin. Homes that were commanding $2,400 a month are now struggling to attract renters at $1,900, with free weeks thrown in and still sitting for 45 days. Thousands of Airbnb operators who thrived during the tourism peak are dumping units into the long-term market as visitor volumes normalize and competition from new hotel inventory intensifies. More new apartment supply is still arriving from projects approved during the frenzy. Las Vegas has an income problem underneath the vacancy problem. The city's workforce is heavily concentrated in hospitality and service industries, jobs that pay well during boom times and cut hours during slow periods. Renters who were stretching to afford 2022 rent levels on 2022 tips are now earning less per shift and being asked to sign at prices that never fully came down. The gap between what landlords want and what the local workforce can pay has widened at both ends simultaneously. A Vegas hospitality worker posted, "I make decent money when the conventions are in town and nothing when they're not. My landlord wants me to sign a 12-month lease at $1,950. I can afford that in February and March. I cannot guarantee that in July. They don't want to hear that, so I'm month to month and they hate it. Fine. I hate my rent too." That dynamic, landlords demanding annual commitment from workers whose income is seasonal by nature, is one of the structural mismatches that keeps Vegas renters perpetually unstable. The market was never built around the actual workers who run the city. It was built around a mythologized version of Vegas income that only exists in the best months of the best years. Las Vegas is the only city in America where the landlords gambled harder than the guests. They bet on infinite tourism demand and infinite population growth, and infinite rent increases simultaneously. The house edge ran out. For once, somebody walked out of Vegas with the money, and it was the renter. A Vegas landlord sits in his Henderson duplex, doing the math on what month-to-month tenancy is costing him in vacancy risk versus the guaranteed income of a locked lease he can't seem to get anyone to sign. He thinks about the blackjack table downstairs at his regular casino. At least there the odds are published. Vegas renter cashes out, or landlord busted. Comment below. 5 cities left, and the next one has the most dramatic reversal on the entire list. Entry 5. San Francisco, California. San Francisco once had the most powerful rental market in human history. That sentence now needs a past tense. San Francisco's rental market was the stuff of legend and nightmare simultaneously. $4,500 for a 1-bedroom, $6,000 for a 2-bedroom with a view of someone else's building. Landlords who inherited 1970s rent-controlled units sitting next to landlords charging market rate for a renovated studio. A 2-tier system that produced wild inequity and even wilder waiting lists for anything affordable. At the peak, it was genuinely insane, and then it got quiet. Average rents in San Francisco have plunged roughly 15% in a single year, the largest decline of any major metro on this list. Vacancy rates in the downtown core have broken records. High-end towers that were commanding $4,000 a month are now offering those units at $3,000 with concessions on top. More than 50,000 residents have left the city since 2021. The downtown corridors that used to hum with startup energy and lunch crowds are now lined with for-lease signs that look like they've been there long enough to become part of the architecture. San Francisco's collapse isn't primarily about the housing market. It's about the city's identity. The tech workers who paid those rents didn't just leave because remote work became permanent. They left because the narrative of San Francisco as the center of the innovation universe stopped being compelling. The city that defined itself through ambition and disruption started feeling like a cautionary tale. When the story of a place changes that fundamentally, the rent follows. A San Francisco landlord who owns 3 units in the Mission District posted, "I have 1 unit rented at market rate, 1 at old rent control rates, 1 empty for 4 months. The empty one is my best unit. I've dropped the price 3 times. The people touring it are offering even less. I'm considering selling the building entirely, and I bought this building in 1999. That tells you where my head is at. For the city itself, the vacancy isn't just a market problem. Every empty unit is a restaurant table that doesn't turn over, a coffee shop that closes early, a bookstore that loses its last regular customer. The rental collapse and the cultural erosion are the same story. San Francisco isn't just losing landlords' revenue, it's losing the density of daily life that made it worth the price in the first place. San Francisco spent 30 years telling everyone that $4,500 for a 1-bedroom was justified because of the energy, the culture, the proximity to innovation. The innovation left, the culture hollowed out, the energy got quiet, and now the $4,500 unit is $3,000 with 6 weeks free and a landlord who will negotiate on parking. Progress. A property owner in Soma walks past her vacant ground floor retail space and her 2 empty residential units above it on her way to get coffee. The coffee shop across the street is gone. The one she's heading to is half full at 10 a.m. on a Thursday. She orders her usual, sits by the window, and watches 3 more for-lease signs in storefronts she remembers being full. SF renter finally, or city is cooked. Drop your take. Next city shows that you don't have to be a coastal superstar to hit the wall. Entry 4. Boise, Idaho. Boise was America's pandemic darling. Remote workers found it, developers found it, landlords found it, and then they all left. Boise's rise was one of the most compressed booms in American real estate history. A quiet mountain city of 250,000 people suddenly became a destination for remote workers fleeing San Francisco, Seattle, and Portland. Home prices more than doubled in 3 years. Rents followed. Local residents who had been renting affordably for decades were priced out of the city they'd lived in their entire lives. Developers arrived and started building luxury product for tech income transplants. Boise rents have fallen roughly 13% year over year, the steepest decline in the Mountain West. Vacancy rates are rising faster here than almost anywhere else in the country. Units that were leasing in days during the peak are now sitting for months. Landlords are cutting asking rents by $300 to $500 and adding free months on top and still watching properties sit empty. Many of the Californians and Seattleites who drove the boom have quietly packed up and gone back. Remote work policies shifted, offices reopened, and suddenly a 2-hour flight to the corporate campus every week was less appealing than just living near it. The twist in Boise is a demographic one. The city's natural renter base, nurses, teachers, service workers, state employees, never had the income to support the rents that were set during the boom. They were pushed out or absorbed into longer commutes and lower quality housing. When the transplants left, those renters didn't rush back in at the inflated prices. They waited. They're still waiting, and the longer they wait, the more leverage they accumulate. A Boise local who'd been renting outside the city wrote, "I got priced out of my own neighborhood in 2021. I watched my rent go from $900 to $2,600 in 2 years. I moved to Nampa. Now my old apartment is listed at $1,200 with a month free. I'm not coming back at $1,200. I'll wait until it hits $950 and then maybe. They priced me out. They can earn my return." That quote is the human cost of the entire cycle condensed into 4 sentences. The local residents who absorbed the worst of the boom are not rushing back to bail out the landlords who benefited from it. The market displaced real people, and now those people are negotiating their return on their own terms. The leverage has genuinely flipped. Boise went from hidden gem to overpriced destination to desperate rental market in approximately 36 months. That might be a speed record for a city that size. The Teton views are still there. The $1,900 studio is now a $1,350 studio with new appliances and a landlord who will absolutely let you have a dog. A Boise landlord who owns a 6-unit building in the North End is sitting across from a prospective tenant. The tenant has toured 4 other buildings this week. The landlord knows this. The tenant knows the landlord knows this. The tenant asks for the first month free and a reduced security deposit. The landlord says yes to both before the sentence is fully finished. Boise bounce back or local renter revenge. Comments are open. 3 left. Each one hits harder than the last. Year. Entry 3. Miami, Florida. Miami convinced itself it was immune to gravity. Rents only go up when you have ocean views, right? The ocean disagrees. Miami's pandemic-era surge was something to witness. Crypto millionaires, finance bros fleeing New York taxes, international capital from Latin America chasing stability, remote workers who wanted to work in hoodies with a beach in the background. From 2020 to 2022, Miami rents climbed more than 60%. Not a typo, 60% in 2 years. Landlords behaved accordingly, with the confidence of people who believe the tide only goes one direction. Average rents in Miami have slipped roughly 11% in a single year. Vacancies are climbing steadily in Brickell downtown Miami and Miami Beach. The luxury buildings with panoramic ocean views and rooftop infinity pools are offering free parking, 0 move-in fees, and gift cards worth $2,000 just to get someone to sign. HOA fees are jumping sharply as buildings scramble to comply with Florida's post-Surfside safety regulations. Insurance premiums have tripled in some cases. The investors who bought at the peak are discovering that carrying costs in Miami in 2026 are significantly higher than anyone modeled in 2021. Miami's problem is layered in a way that makes it uniquely severe. Falling rents would be manageable in isolation, but landlords are absorbing falling rents simultaneously with tripled insurance premiums, rising HOA fees, property tax increases, and a mortgage market that doesn't care about your vacancy rate. It's a margin compression from every direction at once. Some of these properties are genuinely losing money every month, even with a tenant in place. Empty, they're bleeding fast. A Miami condo investor posted, I bought a unit in Brickell in 2021 for $620,000. My carrying costs, mortgage, HOA, insurance, taxes, are $5,400 a month. The unit just rented for $3,800 after sitting empty for 2 months. I am losing $600 a month on a rented unit in Miami. I did not understand this was possible when I bought it. That investor is not alone. Thousands of Miami units are in the same position, generating rental income that doesn't cover the cost of ownership. The people in those situations have a limited number of options: absorb the loss and wait for appreciation that may not come, raise rents into a market that is already declining, or sell at a price that may be below what they paid. None of those options are good. All of them are on the table. Miami spent 2 years being the city where every financial decision looked brilliant in retrospect. Crypto, condos, short-term rentals, restaurant openings, everything worked. Now it's the city where every financial decision from 2021 is being quietly re-examined in a spreadsheet at midnight. The views are still incredible. The math is not. A Brickell landlord is sitting in his investor unit, the one he bought to flip or rent at premium. Doing the monthly reconciliation, he types in the rent received. He types in the mortgage, the HOA, the insurance. He stares at the negative number. He opens Zillow, checks the unit's estimated value, closes the app, and opens it again as if the number might be different. It isn't. Miami renter finally breathes, or investor took the L. Comment below. 2 entries left, and both of them redefine what a rental market collapse actually looks like. Estati. Entry 2. Saddle, Washington. Seattle's rental market was built on the assumption that Amazon and Microsoft would grow forever. Neither of them did. Seattle's entire housing economy was organized around one thesis: tech employment would keep growing, tech salaries would keep climbing, and tech workers would keep needing expensive apartments near campuses in South Lake Union and Bellevue. That thesis made sense for 15 years. It made sense until the tech industry decided that remote work was permanent, that not every job needed to be in Seattle, and that the growth trajectory of the late 2010s was a historical anomaly rather than a baseline. Seattle rents have fallen roughly 10% year over year. In Capitol Hill, South Lake Union, and Belltown, the neighborhoods most dependent on tech worker demand, vacancies are climbing, and discounts that were unheard of 3 years ago are now standard. Buildings that used to post no vacancy signs are advertising cash incentives, free months, and waived deposits. Several large development projects have been paused or abandoned. Skeletal, half-finished structures standing in the skyline as monuments to the moment someone stopped believing the demand curve. Seattle's reversal has a spatial dimension that makes it particularly hard to recover from. The city concentrated its most expensive rental stock in the neighborhoods closest to the tech campuses. Those are exactly the neighborhoods now facing the steepest drops because the anchor tenants, high-income tech workers, are the ones most affected by remote work normalization and layoffs at Amazon and Microsoft. The expensive neighborhoods are getting hit hardest because they were built for a concentration of demand that has now dispersed. A Seattle landlord who owns 4 units in Capitol Hill wrote, "My 2 bedrooms were renting for $2,900 in 2022. I just signed a lease at $2,400 and gave 6 weeks free. My tenants know they have options. They negotiated everything. I accepted everything. I have a mortgage to cover. What choice do I have? What choice does a landlord have when the anchor of their entire investment thesis, tech employment growth, has reversed direction? Not many." The Seattle landlords who stretched to buy in 2021 and 2022 based on the growth story are now trapped in a market where the story changed faster than their mortgage amortization schedule. They're not failing because they made stupid decisions. They're failing because the conditions that made those decisions reasonable no longer exist. Seattle built a rental market on the belief that Amazon would need more and more people in the same zip code forever. Amazon looked at that thesis and invented remote work instead. You can admire the innovation even while watching the vacancy rate climb. A property manager in South Lake Union is on her 4th tour of the day for the same 2-bedroom unit. The 3rd tour was the most promising, a couple relocating from Boston for a Microsoft role. They liked the unit, but said they were also looking in Bellevue and Redmond and would need the security deposit waived and the first month free to make the numbers work. She said she'd check with the owner. The owner already said yes before she called. Seattle Renter W, or Tech Town Exposed. Drop it below, 1 entry left, and it's the one that proves this isn't just a regional story, it's a national one. We are a purple quotes. Entry 1. The national market, the landlord era is ending. Number 1 on this list isn't a city, it's the conclusion that 9 cities have been building toward. From 2020 to 2023, American landlords had more power than they've had at any point in modern history. They raised rents 30, 40, 50% in some markets over 2 years. They eliminated concessions, they ran wait lists. They added fees for things that used to be free. They did this because the structural conditions made it possible. Pandemic-driven migration, supply constraints, remote work reshaping where people needed to live, and a generation of renters with no realistic path to home ownership, and therefore no exit from the rental market. Those conditions have reversed. Not everywhere. Not all at once. But in the 10 cities we just walked through, and in dozens of others showing early signals, the leverage has shifted. Nationally, new apartment supply in 2024 hit the highest level since 1986. Nearly 440,000 new units delivered in a single year. Rent growth has gone negative in more than 30 major metros. Concessions, free months, waived fees, move-in credits have returned to markets that hadn't offered them since 2019. The average vacancy rate across Class A apartment buildings in major metros has climbed above 8%, and this supply pipeline is not done. Units approved during the 2021 and 2022 frenzy are still delivering. The market is absorbing supply from decisions made 3 years ago, and the math on those decisions is coming due right now. Here's the part that almost nobody is saying loudly enough. This reversal is not temporary for most of these markets. The cities that are crashing hardest built their rental pricing on migration patterns that were driven by pandemic-era anomalies, remote work normalization, urban flight, and a once-in-a-generation reshuffling of where Americans chose to live. Those anomalies have unwound. The rents they generated have not fully unwound yet. They are unwinding now, and they have further to go. The landlords who built their financial models on 2022 rent levels, 2022 occupancy rates, and 2022 demand projections are sitting on assumptions that the market is systematically dismantling, city by city, zip code by zip code, month by month. A national real estate analyst wrote recently, "We are entering a multi-year period of landlord pain in the overbuilt metros. The investors who leveraged up during the peak will either work through it slowly or sell at losses." There is no third option that involves current rent levels holding in oversupplied markets. The math is the math. For renters, this moment is real, and it is now. Not in 6 months, not pending a Fed decision. Right now, in these 10 cities and dozens of others, the landlord who used to ghost your maintenance requests is offering you concessions. The building that had a wait list is following up on your tour inquiry. The lease renewal letter that used to arrive with a 15% increase is arriving flat or below your current rate because the landlord knows you have options and would rather keep you than find someone new in a market full of alternatives. Use that leverage, not vindictively, not in bad faith, but understand that the market has handed you something it doesn't hand renters very often, and it won't last forever. Supply gets absorbed. Migration patterns shift again. The next cycle will arrive. But right now, in the summer of 2026, in the markets we've walked through today, the renter has the upper hand. The era of the kombucha tap building, the $75 pet fee, the $25 monthly package locker fee, the $15 amenity fee for a gym that has 4 machines and a Peloton nobody uses. That era is not over everywhere, but in these 10 cities it is having a very difficult year, and it couldn't happen to a more deserving line item on a lease addendum. Somewhere right now in Austin, in Miami, in Seattle, in Phoenix, a landlord is sitting at a desk making a decision they never thought they'd make. They're dropping the rent below what they need to break even, accepting concession terms that eat into thin margins, and signing a lease with a tenant who negotiated harder than anyone negotiated with them in 2022. They're doing it because the alternative, another month of vacancy, is worse. And the tenant walking out of that office with a signed lease and 6 weeks free is walking out with something real. A win in a market that spent 3 years making renters feel like they had no power at all. The landlord era isn't over everywhere. In plenty of markets, tight supply, strong local employment, genuine housing scarcity, landlords still hold the cards. Don't walk into your next renewal in a market we didn't mention today and expect the same leverage. Do your homework first. But in the 10 cities we covered, and in the trajectory the national data is pointing toward, something real has changed. The 3 years of landlord dominance that defined the post-pandemic rental market were built on conditions that were always temporary. Supply responds to pricing, developers respond to margins, migration patterns normalize, and renters push past their limits, stop renting in expensive cities, and find somewhere else to live. All of those corrections are happening simultaneously right now. The landlords who read the room will adapt, cut prices, offer concessions, retain good tenants at fair rates, and survive the cycle. The ones who are still sending 15% renewal increases to tenants who have 9 other options in the same zip code are going to be staring at vacant units and wondering why their management strategy from 2022 stopped working. The answer is in the data we just walked through. The answer is supply. The answer is affordability math that finally broke the price. The answer is renters who got pushed so far that they found alternatives. Smaller cities, roommates, moving back in with family, leaving the expensive metro entirely, and in doing so, remove themselves from the demand side of the equation. If this breakdown gave you something useful, whether you're a renter figuring out how to negotiate, an owner trying to understand what's happening to your returns, or just someone who watches housing data with the same morbid fascination as the rest of us, hit like, subscribe, and drop your city in the comments. Tell me what you're seeing on the ground. Are landlords in your market feeling the pressure? Have you negotiated your rent down recently? Are you watching units in your building sit empty? The national data tells one story. The people living it tell another. Both of those matter. We'll keep following the numbers. And right now, for the first time in 3 years, the numbers are pointing somewhere that looks a lot like relief for renters, and a very long overdue reckoning for the landlords who forgot that the market works in both directions.